Francis spent the day in joyous celebration in one of the most troubled regions of Italy. He started at a small shrine in Pompeii and then moved on to Scampia in the periphery of Naples. This is the epicenter of the Camorra crime syndicate's illicit work.
In a recent address, Pope Francis made statements about Jesus that have taken the world by surprise. His words have not only prompted Christians to re-examine deeply held beliefs, but have also generated intense debate. Known for his progressive stance on LGBTQ+ inclusion, women's leadership, and issues of social justice, Pope Francis has already pushed the boundaries of traditional papal norms. Now, his recent comments have drawn accusations of heresy, marking what many see as a turning point in the Catholic Church. Could this moment signal a lasting change in the Church's direction? Pope Francis's radical church reforms. Since becoming Pope in 2013, Francis has distinguished himself from previous popes by focusing on themes of inclusion, humility, and social engagement. His approach has been markedly different, seeking to bring the Church closer to global concerns in unprecedented ways. Now, his statements regarding Jesus have sparked a global reaction, with some wondering if his remarks could reshape traditional understandings of the crucifixion itself. From the start, Pope Francis's choice of the name Francis signaled his commitment to reform. Named after Saint Francis of Assisi, a saint known for his devotion to the poor, renunciation of wealth, and dedication to the environment, the Pope's choice highlighted his commitment to social justice and environmental stewardship, reflecting his namesake's values. Breaking tradition for a humble approach. For centuries, the Catholic Church has been synonymous with formality and grandeur. Traditionally, the Pope resides in the luxurious apostolic palace, a symbol of the Church's historic power. However, Pope Francis made a surprising choice to live in the Vatican guesthouse, reflecting a new model of papal humility that brought him physically and symbolically closer to the people. This decision set the tone for his mission to foster a church rooted in humility, serving society's most vulnerable. Climate, poverty, and a push for inclusivity. Modernizing the Church has been a critical component of Pope Francis's leadership. In 2015, he released Laudato Si', an encyclical focused entirely on environmental protection. For the first time, a papal document positioned environmental degradation as a moral issue, emphasizing the interconnectedness of climate change and poverty. Pope Francis underscored that the harm inflicted on the planet disproportionately impacts the poor, making climate action a moral imperative. Beyond climate, he has also focused on poverty and inequality, critiquing capitalism's role in widening wealth gaps and advocating for economic systems that prioritize human dignity over profit. This approach has sometimes been controversial, as it calls for alternative economic models and has led to criticisms from both within and outside the Church. The Pope's call to welcome migrants has similarly sparked debate, as he challenges nationalist views in favor of compassion and support for refugees. A new perspective on Jesus' crucifixion. In one of his most polarizing statements, Pope Francis recently described Jesus' crucifixion as an apparent failure from a human perspective. These words were startling, particularly for those who traditionally view Christ's death as an act of divine triumph. This statement wasn't a dismissal of the resurrection. Instead, it highlighted the human experience of suffering and loss that Christ endured. Pope Francis emphasized that the crucifixion's failure reflected the ultimate act of humility and vulnerability, aligning Jesus with humanity's own struggles and weaknesses. This interpretation, though challenging to many, underscores a powerful message of resilience in the face of suffering. By reframing the crucifixion as a demonstration of Jesus' humility, Francis suggests that true victory lies not in avoiding hardship but in embracing it as a path to spiritual growth. Facing backlash and heresy accusations. Unsurprisingly, Pope Francis's views have triggered backlash. Traditionalist factions argue that his focus on modern issues and inclusivity is diluting core Catholic teachings. His perspectives on issues such as LGBTQ+ inclusivity, divorce, and the economy have drawn accusations of heresy, particularly from conservative theologians who view his reforms as undermining doctrinal integrity. For instance, his now famous line, "Who am I to judge?" regarding LGBTQ+ priests, symbolized his more inclusive stance and has encouraged discussions about greater acceptance. More recently, his Synod on Synodality aims to engage lay people, clergy, and bishops in dialogue about the Church's future, reflecting his vision for a more inclusive and compassionate Church. A shift in traditional Church authority. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis has continued to challenge long-standing Church traditions, especially regarding marriage, divorce, and LGBTQ+ issues. His 2016 document Amoris Laetitia introduced the possibility of communion for divorced and remarried Catholics, sparking criticism from traditionalists who believe it undermines the sanctity of marriage. Accusations of heresy followed, with some calling for Pope Francis to clarify his stance on these issues. Despite the backlash, Pope Francis remained steadfast, emphasizing that mercy, inclusion, and understanding are at the heart of the Church's mission. His commitment to a Church that walks with people through their struggles, acting as a field hospital for the spiritually and emotionally wounded, reflects his compassionate and reformist vision. Scandals and calls for accountability. Another major controversy has been the Pope's handling of clergy misconduct within the Church. Determined to confront this issue, Pope Francis has introduced measures aimed at transparency and accountability, even establishing tribunals to investigate bishops accused of covering up offenses. However, critics argue that the Church's response has been too slow, and victims' advocates continue to call for more decisive action. In many ways, Pope Francis's papacy represents a profound shift, balancing a commitment to Catholic tradition with a call to address modern challenges. As he moves forward with his ambitious agenda, the divide between traditionalists and progressives continues to deepen. The future of the Church, and its ability to evolve while staying true to its core values, remains uncertain. The script covers a broad spectrum of pivotal controversies that have characterized Pope Francis's papacy, especially focusing on his efforts to modernize the Catholic Church, his responses to ongoing misconduct scandals, inclusivity toward LGBTQ+ individuals, advocacy for women's roles, and bold critiques of modern economic systems. Each area represents a push against traditional boundaries, creating significant tension within the Church. Handling of misconduct allegations in the Church. The scandal surrounding American Cardinal Theodore McCarrick in 2018 was a turning point in the Church's long-standing struggle with abuse allegations. Despite years of accusations, McCarrick held influence until the scandal erupted publicly, forcing Pope Francis to take action by eventually removing him from the priesthood. For many, this response was long overdue, illustrating the Church's historical slowness in addressing such grave issues and reigniting debates over whether Pope Francis's reforms are robust enough to address the systemic nature of abuse within the Church. The scandal underscored that, despite Pope Francis's creation of investigative bodies and tribunals aimed at accountability, the culture of secrecy and institutional protectionism remains deeply rooted. This ongoing problem raises the question of whether Francis's reforms can bring about the profound cultural shift needed or if the underlying issues are too ingrained to be resolved from within. Moreover, critics argue that the Church has not done enough to support survivors tangibly, despite symbolic gestures like papal apologies and meetings with survivors. Advocates for survivors contend that meaningful change must go beyond words, calling for financial support, mental health resources, and concrete reparations as essential to prioritizing victims over the institution. Until these areas are fully addressed, they argue, the Church will struggle to move forward and regain trust. LGBTQ+ inclusion. Pope Francis's stance on LGBTQ+ inclusion has arguably been one of the most contentious and transformative aspects of his papacy. His 2013 remark, "Who am I to judge?" marked a major shift in tone from past papal stances and signaled a move toward a more compassionate approach to LGBTQ+ Catholics, igniting hope for many who had long felt marginalized. Under his leadership, the Church has facilitated new platforms, such as the Synod on Synodality, where LGBTQ+ individuals were encouraged to share their faith experiences, including those from countries where LGBTQ+ issues are often stigmatized. This gesture toward inclusivity recognizes the universal desire for respect and belonging, even within the constraints of traditional Church teachings. Pope Francis has taken other significant steps, such as meeting with transgender individuals in 2021, which marked a historic moment in Vatican history. This encounter was more than symbolic. It provided emotional validation to those who felt alienated from the church due to their gender identity, emphasizing that compassion and acceptance are essential aspects of Pope Francis's ministry. His endorsement of blessings for same-sex couples earlier this year, while not a call for full marriage equality, was nonetheless groundbreaking and reflects an unprecedented openness. However, this inclusive stance has been met with resistance from conservative factions within the Church, who argue that these changes threaten core doctrines on marriage and family life. They fear that by adapting to contemporary societal pressures, the Church risks losing its theological foundations, thereby creating confusion among the faithful. Empowerment of women in leadership roles. Pope Francis has made significant strides in advancing the role of women within the Catholic Church, challenging long-standing norms that have historically restricted women to peripheral roles. His appointment of Sister Natalie Beckcourt as the first woman with voting rights in the Synod of Bishops represents a monumental shift, as this council plays an influential role in advising the Pope. Additionally, his decision to appoint several women to key leadership roles within the Roman Curia is a clear indication of his commitment to elevating women's voices within the Vatican's central administrative body. The possibility of appointing women as deacons, a discussion revived by Francis, has sparked intense debate, particularly among conservative factions that view such a move as a departure from the Church's tradition of a male-only clergy. Historically, women did serve as deacons in some Christian communities, performing various ministerial duties. However, this practice diminished over time, and today's Catholic hierarchy views it as a significant doctrinal shift that could challenge the exclusivity of the male priesthood. Pope Francis's openness to revisiting this tradition underscores his desire to align church roles with modern societal values while preserving essential elements of its identity. Economic justice and critique of capitalism. Pope Francis's outspoken critique of modern economic systems and his call for economic justice reflect his background and perspective shaped by Latin American liberation theology. His encyclical Evangelii Gaudium criticized the unfettered pursuit of money as harmful to society, describing it as the dung of the devil. Francis's critique of profit-driven economies challenges conventional capitalist ideals, asserting that an economy should be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members rather than by its profitability. He argues that prioritizing humanity over profit is essential, and that failing to do so creates a throwaway culture that reduces people to mere resources. His encyclical Laudato Si takes this argument further by linking economic injustice to environmental degradation, suggesting that greed-driven systems exploit both people and the planet, creating a moral crisis in need of urgent reform. Francis's stance has provoked significant backlash, particularly from those who argue that capitalism has lifted millions out of poverty. Critics accuse him of promoting socialism, fearing that his emphasis on redistribution and government intervention undermines principles of personal responsibility and entrepreneurship. Francis, however, remains steadfast in his vision, asserting that the economy's purpose should be to serve humanity rather than the other way around. He challenges the prevailing economic structure and calls for a moral reassessment, advocating for a system where dignity and justice are central. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.